Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because otherwise I'm going to turn into gems. Today we're going to be talking about Margaret Owen's Little Thieves series. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I think I had a review copy possibly of this first book. But I do think I bought this copy myself, and then book 2, Painted Devils, I have digitally and I've read it from the library. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the book as a whole. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read this and book 2 and we'll talk then. And I will link the story graph for the series down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. This is a book that I would describe as young adult-ish. I think it just about crosses over into adult, but it's got a lot of young adult stuff at the core. Fantasy book. It is a very loose retelling of the Goose Girl or the Little Goose Girl. I would describe it as being the starting point of the story, and then it sort of spans off in a bunch of different directions. It's also been described as gaslamp fantasy. I really need to look up a definition of that to see if I agree with it, but apparently it is. Book 1, Little Thieves, came out in 2021. Book 2 came out in 2023, Painted Devils, and we are looking for Holy Terrors in 2025. This is, in fact, I believe a trilogy. When I first read it, I thought it was a duology. I don't remember why and how that happened. I think I talked about it at the time. Read book 2, didn't take any of it in. Thought I had finished a series, turns out I had not. Reread book 2, realised I had not. Margaret Owen has also written the Merciful Crow duology, which I have not read. Allow me to read to you from the blurb. Once upon a time there was a horrible girl. Vanya Schmidt knows that no gift is freely given, not even a mother's love. The adopted goddaughter of death and fortune, Vanya has long made her way in the world as a dutiful servant of Princess Giselle, until a year ago when her otherworldly mothers demanded payment for their care, and Vanya decided to steal her future back by stealing Giselle's life. With the help of an enchanted string of pearls, Vanya transformed into her former mistress and took her place, leaving the real Giselle a penniless nobody. Now Vanya leads a lonely but lucrative double life as a princess and jewel thief, charming the nobility while emptying their coffers to fund her great escape. Until, one heist away from freedom, Vanya crosses the wrong god and is cursed to turn into jewels stone by stone. With a feral guardian half-god, Giselle's sinister fiancé, and an over-eager junior detective on her tail, Vanya has just 2 weeks to pull off her biggest grift yet, or she risks losing more than her freedom. She could lose her life. And there we go. Now we've reached the point where I've run out of notes. I think the setting for this series is very cool. It's very classic fairy tale. We have a lot of woods and journeying, travelling, quests, heists, that kind of thing. Princes, princesses, all of the above. And one of the things I really like about it is the way that it deals with divinity. We have the idea of small gods in this series, so a lot of gods that are representative of very small things, a lot of locally worshipped gods. It feels very appropriate to that kind of time period that it's trying to capture in terms of the idea of divinity. And how that all ties into the way that magic works is very interesting, and how Vanya interacts with the world as somebody who is God-touched in a lot of ways. Her godmothers are death and fortune. I really liked those elements. I think they're probably my favourite bits of the story, and I really liked how that developed into book 2. Book 2 in particular has a lot to say about what is a god and what isn't, and I think that's very fascinating. We're definitely dealing with God with a small g rather than trying to talk about big divinity, perhaps. And the title of book 3 has me very excited that we're going to get into that even more later on. However, I would say book 1 is most concerned with Vanya as a character, and it's a good thing because she's a great character. We meet her at the start of the book in the middle of a jewel heist where she is impersonating Giselle and having just a wonderful time. I think Vanya's a character who deals with a lot of hardship but has a real core of joy in what she does, and I think that she is seizing life and seizing opportunities everywhere she goes, and it makes her a really enjoyable character to read. You really care about her, you really understand her motivations, why she's doing things, and I think you really feel for her in a lot of ways. She is often dealt the short end of the stick, and it's not that everything she does is beyond reproach as a result. She's a very contemplative character in a lot of ways and really understands her flaws, but it's that you just really understand where she's coming from and why she's ended up in this position. That combined with all of the side characters, most of whom are absolutely wonderful. I really enjoy her love interest, is very fascinating. He's a very, in my opinion, very classic YA to adult fantasy book of this kind love interest, but that's no bad thing. There's a lot of comforting stuff in the series. The friends she makes, the creatures she encounters, all of which are great fun. My overall feeling about this book and book 2 is that they are very easy reads, they are not difficult to get into, they are very understandable, particularly if, like me, you're kind of... I think like my base foundation of literature is Fairytale, and this definitely fits in with that. In terms of being a little Goose Girl retelling, as I say, I think it is clearly drawing inspiration from that, but I wouldn't expect to just read it as a straight little Goose Girl retelling, perhaps. But it is very familiar, very comforting, very easy to read. I felt like book 2 took a little bit more time to warm up and has something of a slightly sillier premise in parts, but I think still an important premise to go into, which I'm not going to talk about too much because I do think it would spoil book 1. But it is a fun time. It's a very interesting plot line, and I think it was important to delve into, as much as it did make me chuckle a few times while I was reading it. But I do think these books are meant to be kind of funny. They're meant to be entertaining in that way. And that's something that I look for. That's something I really like. When you just want to have a bit of a turn my brain off, read an enjoyable book that doesn't feel completely no stakes. This is the kind of series I enjoy. Book 2 took a little bit more time to get into, is probably the thing I would criticise the most. And then I have to criticise myself for not realising that book 2 wasn't a ending the first time that I read it. That's just a criticism of me as a person. I'm trying to think of other reasons someone might not enjoy this. I guess if you're not into the kind of fairy tale aspects, or you don't want to read a romance with a lot of, oh, just talk to each other. It's not the most egregious example of all your problems would be solved with a conversation, and they do tend to eventually have a conversation, but it is there, and I know some people find that very frustrating. I think book 2 even more so leans into that romantic element more, so if that's not something you liked in book 1, I don't think you will like book 2. I'll be really interested to see where book 3 goes with it, whether it feels more like a conclusion to a romance or a conclusion to a fantasy series. Not that those two things are mutually exclusive, but it'll be interesting to see where the focus lies. In terms of comparisons and other things, in terms of fairy tale retellings, I'm sure I have read a little Goose Girl retelling. I can't remember when, but I feel like I can picture the cover, and I will put it up on screen if I can find what it was, and I did enjoy that one. In terms of the way it deals with gods and divinity in a lot of ways, I think we could probably quite easily compare it to the Winternight trilogy by Catherine Arden. That is much more about the struggle between the small gods, the quote-unquote low gods, and Christianity in a lot of ways. I think there are a lot of similarities in the way that Vanya in Little Thieves and Vasya in Winternight interact with that kind of divine element to the world. I thought that was interesting. I wonder if tonally it's a little bit similar to A Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry, in terms of like slightly amusing, a little bit aware that it is a book and a narrative kind of story, perhaps. Overall, I would say these books are worth reading. I really enjoyed it. I would take them on holiday with me if I was going to read them again. I think they just feel like they fit a really neat place in my shelves, and they really tick a lot of boxes for what I particularly enjoy in this kind of, as I say, YA adjacent fiction. It is not a YA fantasy, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree with me, and even indeed the marketing team for this book may completely disagree with me, but I think it appeals to me in that way. I really like elements of it, and I think they're really beautiful covers as well. Whoever the cover artist is, you did a great job. I will be very excitedly waiting for book 3 next year. Have you read any of the books in this series? Have you read Margaret Owen's other work? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord, where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Today we are talking about Margaret Owen's Stop closing. I need to change my settings.